In this episode, let's have a look at the video features on the Sony a5100. Well, let's have a quick look at the video features on the Sony a5100, which is a $600 US camera that I recently bought for my wife. Nobody paid for me to do this review, and I think this is just an option that you can consider if you're looking for your first camera. I think it's actually a really great camera. First of all, it has an APS-C size sensor, which matters because it allows you to get a shallow depth of field and blur the backgrounds with the right lens. Not so easy with the kit lens that it comes with, but not impossible either. I really like the APS-C size sensor for video. It feels like a good middle ground that allows you to get things in focus and work in relatively little light, while at the same time giving you that aesthetic where you can get a shallow depth of field. It shoots 1080p HD at 60, 30, or 24 frames per second at up to 50 megabits per second bitrate. It does not shoot 4K video. It records to a variety of video recording formats, codecs, including XAVCS, which is really one of Sony's more professional codecs. And it records to XAVCS in 50 megabits per second, which is really kind of a nice middle ground between quality and file size. It can also record to the older AVC HD format or MP4, although it does record at those lower bit rates, and in the case of MP4, it does it at some strange resolutions, which doesn't look like it's full HD, so I'd really stick with XAVCS, which produces the highest quality of the three. The build quality overall seems good. The body is plastic, but a fairly high-grade plastic that's easy to mistake for metal. The lens mount is metal, and the buttons all seem reasonably durable. This camera is part of the Sony E-mount interchangeable lens system, which means there are lots of lens options available. E-mount is actually getting pretty mature at this point. It's not perfect. There's still some holes in the lens lineup, but pretty good. There are also adapters available, such as the Metabones Speed Booster and just Lens Adapter, that allow you to use lenses from other manufacturers. So for example, they have a Nikon to Sony E-mount adapter, which would allow me to use my Nikon lenses. I don't have that yet, so I haven't been able to test that, but that is an option, and it really makes this kind of a versatile system. You can order the camera with a kit lens. The kit lens is a 16 to 50 millimeter zoom, which is really a nice range. The body of the lens and the lens mount itself both feel like they're metal, though the zoom ring is actually plastic. The lens also has optical steady shot image stabilization. It's not a fast lens, so it's really hard to get a shallow depth of field, but it is decent in terms of sharpness, and it's a fine starter lens. It's reasonably versatile. The LCD screen on the back is a flip-up screen, which is very nice for low-angle shots and selfie video, but does not flip down or articulate to the sides. It is a touchscreen, sort of. The touchscreen feature works for focusing or to zoom in to check on your focus, or for taking a photo, but it does not work in the menus or any other place. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing from my experience. That gives you less chance that you'll accidentally touch it and mess with some of your settings, and it performs really what I would consider the most critical tasks. In video mode, you can work in manual, aperture priority, shutter priority, or program mode. Program mode sets the shutter and aperture for you. I typically shoot in manual mode so that I can get the exact exposure that I want and tweak my lighting without the camera changing exposure on me. So really, all the options you need. The camera has a really small battery, and the battery life is not amazing, but it is good enough for shorter pieces. I probably get about an hour and a half of straight shooting. The camera does not come with a charger, so this is kind of good and bad. You actually charge the battery while it's in the camera with a USB cable. The USB cable can plug into AC power, or of course you could use a regular USB cable into your computer. But if you want to keep the overall package small, it's really nice that you don't have to also carry a charger. If you're going to be doing a lot of shooting, you're probably going to want to invest in an additional battery and a battery charger as well. Focus on this little camera is actually quite impressive. There are lots of different autofocus modes that work well and quickly. There also is one that locks onto faces and keeps the face in focus. Can be super helpful for talking head style video. The focus peaking, if you're not familiar with that type of feature, is very nice for manually focusing, like real movie makers do. The edges of the items change to a different color when they're in focus, and once you get used to it, it's really hard to give that feature up. How clean is this camera when you're shooting in low light or cranking the ISO up? Well, it's pretty amazing, actually. It's actually better than my Panasonic GH4, which cost over 3 times what this camera costs. It goes all the way up to 12,800 ISO, and if you want to push even farther, it does have a high 1 and high 2 setting, although I don't think those are very practical. I think it's really usable up to an ISO of 3200 in video mode, which should cover almost all shooting scenarios, making this, again, camera a very versatile option. It also has some exposure tools, which are very nice, zebra stripes and histograms. These are not as amazing as something like false color or waveform monitors, but they're very good in a camera in this class. Zebra stripes show you where the image is clipping. That is, the brightest values are too bright for the camera to record, so there's no detail left. The histogram is a decent get you in the ballpark sort of exposure tool to make sure you're not crushing the shadows or clipping the highlights. The camera does have an HDMI output. The HDMI output is a micro HDMI connector, which is not ideal, but probably to be expected in a camera this size, very small. It outputs 422 8-bit color, and you can use that to record to an external HDMI recorder like the Atomos Ninja Star, Ninja 2, even the Shogun. The camera has Wi-Fi, and I don't really use this a lot, but it is there if you're into that. It can transfer video and photos to your smartphone. Evidently, you're supposed to be able to control the camera from your phone with the Sony app, but I spent 3 to 5 minutes trying to get it to work, and I couldn't figure out how to get that to work. So I'm not saying it doesn't work, just that Sony really needs to work on their app and get it simplified so it's a lot easier to use. The physical controls on the camera, there are not a lot of them, but they've implemented things pretty well. So once you get used to using the wheel and the buttons, you can get to most of the critical settings quickly. Specifically, you don't have to go into a menu to set your aperture, shutter speed, or ISO, which are the really kind of critical settings. Unfortunately, for white balance, you do have to do a menu dive. The default settings are definitely aimed at people that just want to shoot without worrying about settings. I'd say maybe for non-enthusiasts or consumers. And that's really good if you aren't a video shooting geek and you just want to get something up and running and record your videos. But for those that prefer to be in control, you can turn off all these helpful auto settings and take full control, which is super nice. The white balance includes custom and manual Kelvin settings, so it's quite flexible and really has all the settings you should ever need. Like picture styles on Canon or picture controls on Nikon, the Sony has what they call creative styles, and in my case I found that I really like to use the standard and decrease the contrast, saturation, and sharpness each by -1. The menus, not bad, pretty easy to get through, and they're pretty easy to figure out, so I'm actually pretty happy with that. Now on the downside, there is no microphone input, no 3.5mm mic input. So you're either going to have mediocre camera sound or record to an external audio recorder. Now, as many of you know, I like to record to an external audio recorder anyway, so for me, not a big downside, but I thought you all should know about that in case that's critical to your workflow. There's no electronic viewfinder, so when you're out in direct sunlight, things can get a little tricky, especially making sure that you're completely in focus. You might need to bring a cloth to throw over your LCD screen in your head like an old-fashioned photographer. As far as moire is concerned, moire is the patterns that you get, sort of dancing patterns of multicolors when you video something that has a tight pattern or tight texture. Often you'll see it on people's shirts when you're doing talking head. You'll see it on fences and things like that when you're shooting outdoors. It's a very ugly pattern, but it looks like the Sony a5100 has done a very nice job controlling that. On my test shirt here, which gets plenty of moire on some of my other cameras that I've had in the past, doesn't seem to get any at all on the a5100. Does it have rolling shutter? Yes. Every camera, pretty much in the consumer range, that doesn't have a global shutter has rolling shutter. I don't see that that's a huge issue. You can actually fix that in post pretty nicely. So I don't see that as a major drawback of this camera or any others in its class. Should use the a5100 or the a6000, which only costs $100 more, which gives you more physical controls and a viewfinder. And the answer is, well, yeah, I think the perfect camera would be the a6000 with the XAVCS recording format. Because the a5100 came out later than the a6000, it includes the XAVCS recording format, whereas the a6000 does not. When you're shooting video, I think that kind of makes a big difference. But also a viewfinder is really, really helpful if you're shooting outdoors a lot. So it really comes down to the question, are you going to be shooting outdoors a lot? Or do you have a little time when you can wait? I expect that when Sony releases the replacement or the newer revision of the a6000 or perhaps an a7000, if they're going to do that, I don't know. But I expect that that new version will have the XAVCS recording format as well at 50 megabits per second. And then it will become an easier question to answer. So there you have a quick overview of the video features of the Sony a5100. I think this is really an impressive little camera for the money. I bought mine in December 2014 for $500 US. That was on special for the holidays. And right now I think the MSRP or the kind of standard retail price is $600 US with the kit lens. I'd expect to see that come down over time. But in any case, I think it's a great camera. If you have any questions, go ahead and leave those down below. Thanks for checking out this episode. And if you haven't already subscribed, make sure you do that. And we'll be sure to get you new weekly videos that help you improve your lighting and sound for video. Talk with you soon.